The Ghost Bride of US Route 93. It was a cold, dark night and on US Route 93 in Idaho, known among drivers as one of the state's most haunted highways. Dave, an experienced truck driver, was on his usual route, hauling cargo north. The road, empty and dimly lit, was familiar, but something felt different that night. As he entered the most isolated part of the route, a chilling sensation washed over him, hard to ignore. Dave glanced at the clock. It was past 2 in the morning, and thick clouds covered the sky, leaving no stars in sight. The only sound in the cab was the hum of the engine, yet the silence seemed oppressive. Usually skeptical of ghost stories, he recalled the legends about US Route 93, especially one of a ghostly bride who appeared to travelers at night. The story went that she was a bride on her way to her wedding but had died in an accident. Since then, her spirit wandered the road in her wedding gown, searching for something she'd never find. Dave smiled to himself, trying to shake off the fear. Just a superstition, he muttered. To break the tension, he turned on the radio, but to his surprise, static filled the cab. Frustrated, he adjusted the dial, but the static persisted. Determined to focus, he kept his gaze on the road until something made his heart race. A figure in white appeared on the roadside. A chill ran through him as he gripped the wheel tightly. Instinctively, he slowed down, wary of losing control of the truck. Looking closer, he saw it was a woman standing on the shoulder, wearing what looked like a wedding dress. Her head was bowed, hiding her face. Dave's heart pounded. He could hardly believe his eyes. He stopped the truck on the shoulder, his hands still gripping the wheel. Slowly, the woman lifted her head, revealing an empty face. Her eyes filled with indescribable sorrow. Dave felt a knot in his stomach. Hesitantly, he cracked his window and called out, "Are you okay? Do you need help?" She didn't respond. Instead, she raised her arm and pointed down the road, as if directing him to continue. Despite his fear, Dave felt an inexplicable compulsion to obey. He put the truck in gear, driving slowly forward, glancing in his rearview mirror to see her. But to his horror, she had vanished. One moment she was there, the next she was gone. Heart pounding, he sped up, wanting to leave that place far behind. But just a few minutes later, he saw her again. This time, she stood in the middle of the road, forcing him to brake hard to avoid hitting her. The truck stopped just feet away, and he sat frozen, breathing heavily. Before he could react, the woman was beside his window, her face pale, her sorrowful eyes fixed on him. Dave, unable to move, reached for the radio, hoping the noise would break the eerie silence, but heard only static. She continued to stare, her expression unreadable. Then, in a whisper, she spoke. "Can you hear me?" He nodded, speechless. Her voice grew sadder as she went on. "I was on my way to my wedding, but I never made it. The road, it betrayed me." Her expression changed from sorrow to something darker. It was then that he noticed the wilted bouquet of flowers in her hands. The petals seemed to crumble as she held them, disappearing before they touched the ground. A deep terror engulfed him as he realized how real she seemed. "Many have passed me by, leaving me here alone," she murmured. "I wait, always waiting." And then, just as suddenly as she had appeared, she vanished. Dave sat motionless, his hands trembling on the wheel, his mind racing to understand what had happened. Finally, he restarted the truck and drove off, desperate to leave the memory behind. But even as he drove, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was still being watched. By dawn, he reached his destination. Exhausted and shaken, he stopped at a truck stop to rest, usually private. He felt compelled to share his experience with a fellow trucker nearby. The man listened silently, a grim expression on his face. "So you saw the bride?" the other driver asked quietly. "Many have seen her over the years, but few talk about it. They say she's trapped there, waiting for someone to finally take her home." A heavy silence fell between them. Dave, who had never been superstitious, felt a chill. The thought of a lost soul wandering the highway, bound to her final moments, haunted him deeply. Ever since that night, he couldn't drive along Route 93 without feeling an eerie chill. Months passed, but Dave couldn't forget her pale face, the wedding gown, and those sorrowful eyes that seemed to see through him. The memory lingered like a shadow, an echo of that night on one of Idaho's loneliest roads.